January 1945. Cold bites through the streets of Brussels. Snow drifts like frozen whispers. A city scarred by war, yet another battle waits far from the front lines. Inside a crowded press room, tension crackles like static electricity. Field Marshal Bernard Montgomery steps up, eyes sharp, voice calm. Unity, the fragile thread holding the Allies together, trembles. Every syllable risks more than pride. Strategy, cohesion, lives. Meanwhile, Winston Churchill watches silently. A pen scratches a note. A quiet phone call. One man, balancing egos, reputations, and the fate of the war. One man capable of keeping an alliance from crumbling without firing a single shot. Can diplomacy be stronger than bullets? Could one careful intervention save thousands of soldiers in frozen forests of Belgium? Comment below, have you ever seen leadership wielded like a weapon? Subscribe for more untold stories from winter of 1944. The Ardennes forest, dark, dense, unforgiving. Snow blanketed the earth, roads slick, rivers frozen like shattered mirrors. Every breath burned, every step threatened. American forces were stretched thin, tanks groaned along icy paths, radios froze, supplies disappeared in white wastelands. Officers rubbed frostbitten hands, eyes scanning endless trees. One wrong move, disaster. Across the lines, Germans pressed relentlessly. Surprise attacks, artillery barrages, micro-shocks at every turn, an ambushed convoy. A misfired gun, frozen radios cutting orders. Small failures became lethal. But the battle wasn't just here behind the front. In warm press rooms, tempers flared. Montgomery's confident words clashed with American pride. A sentence taken wrong, an ego bruised, unity shattered. Soldiers shivered in trenches. Couriers risked ambushes to carry vital intelligence. Commanders weighed every choice, balancing lives, morale, and fragile alliances. The stakes, Europe itself. Leadership here wasn't just about guns. It was diplomacy, strategy, ego, and timing. One man's voice, Churchill, could tilt the balance without firing a single shot. Ask yourself, how much power does a word have in war? Comment below. Sometimes history is written in whispers, not gunfire. Churchill. A man of contradictions, quietly commanding yet forceful when it mattered most. He knew the stakes. One misstep, one slighted ego, could fracture the Allied front. His mind raced through maps, reports, and press cables, each detail a thread in a delicate web. He understood people, the generals, the soldiers, the press. Eisenhower, steady, calculating. Patton, fiery, unpredictable. Bradley, pragmatic, disciplined. Each carried pride, ambition, fear. Each could tip the scales, for better or worse. The press conference hung in the air like a storm. Montgomery's words, intended or not, cut through corridors of power. American generals bristled. Morale wavered. Unity cracked. Every whispered complaint, every tense glance became a micro-shock in a fragile system. Churchill's strategy, subtle, he reassured privately, praising command where due. Publicly, he celebrated every Allied soldier's courage, ensuring no one felt slighted. A masterstroke of diplomacy, timing, and psychological insight. Even in chaos, his mind worked like a war machine, predicting reactions, measuring temperaments, calculating the ripple effect of every sentence. Leadership wasn't just about orders, it was reading humans like maps, navigating egos like artillery fire. And here's the question for you. Could one man's subtle action prevent a fracture in a massive war alliance? Reflect on that. Comment below if you think diplomacy can be as powerful as bullets. January 1945. Europe's winter was relentless. Snow blanketed the Ardennes, icy winds slicing through the forest like sharpened blades. In command rooms, maps were spread over wooden tables, edges curling from damp. Pens scratched, telegraphs clicked, and low murmurs echoed the heartbeat of strategy. Eisenhower studied every report with precision. Troop movements, ammunition stockpiles, terrain pitfalls. Every detail mattered. Every miscalculation could spell disaster. Patton, pacing, fumed over Montgomery's press remarks, rehearsing counter-arguments in his mind. Bradley observed silently, calculating risk and reward, knowing patience was its own weapon. The generals planned, the officers refined. Soldiers drilled in freezing snow, boots crunching over frost-crusted ground, their breaths visible in the cold air. Improvisation became routine. Bridges improvised with logs, supply lines rerouted around frozen rivers, radios repaired mid-snowstorm. Every day was a test, every move a small gamble. Behind the scenes, intelligence reports created suspense. Would Montgomery escalate his claims? How would American commanders respond publicly? These micro-shocks pulsed through the Allied leadership. Every conversation, every press release carried potential chaos. And here's a thought. What if the tiniest action, a single word in a press room, could alter the course of history? Pause, reflect, and imagine it. Comment your thoughts below. Would you have acted differently if you were in their shoes? Tension hung in the air like the winter fog over the Ardennes. Every message from the front lines was a heartbeat, every phone call a potential spark. Montgomery's press statements had ignited murmurs. How would the Allies react? The generals felt it, a fragile unity, threatened not by bullets, but by words. In small conference rooms, micro-shocks surfaced constantly. A telegram arrived late, a misread map coordinate, a delayed convoy. Patton's face tightened with impatience. Bradley's eyes scanned reports like a hawk. Eisenhower's calm exterior belied the storm in his mind, a battle of diplomacy and authority. Outside, soldiers shivered in frost-choked trenches, unaware of the political tremors above. The wind rattled empty shells, carrying with it the smell of coal smoke and pine. Each small misstep could cascade into catastrophe. Every whispered rumor, every half-true story from the press became a hazard. And yet, ingenuity persisted. Officers improvised. Signals were rerouted, plans revised on the fly. Leadership was tested not in the roar of guns, but in the subtle, relentless tension of human unpredictability. Ask yourself, could diplomacy in a press room carry the weight of a battlefield? Could one leader's restraint save thousands? Reflect, comment below, and think history is as much about human choices as it is about war. The press room was electric, a storm ready to break. Montgomery's words echoed across Europe, headlines flashing like artillery fire. But Churchill remained a calm eye in the chaos. With measured steps, he navigated the corridors of power, papers in hand, mind calculating every risk. Every word he would utter publicly and privately was a move on a giant chessboard. Micro-shocks punctuated the day. Aides whispered rumors, telegrams slipped under doors, journalists poised their recorders. A single misstep could ignite public outrage, fracture the Allied command, and embolden the enemy. Churchill's escape plan was subtle. Reaffirm Eisenhower's command behind closed doors, elevate American generals' contributions, and praise all troops publicly without humiliating Montgomery. Time became a weapon. Each minute stretched like the cold Ardennes winter. Churchill's advisors held their breath, cameras flashed, reporters murmured. The weight of history pressed against every shoulder, and then it began the delicate dance of words. Churchill's voice, calm yet authoritative, cut through tension like a blade. Statements were delivered, acknowledgments balanced, egos managed. The room was a battlefield of diplomacy, the stakes invisible but immense. Pause, reflect. Could one man's precision of words alter the course of a global conflict? History watched, breathless. Comment your thoughts. Would you have the courage to steer nations with just words? The room erupted not with gunfire, but with a chaos of conflicting loyalties and tense whispers. Papers rustled, telegraphs buzzed, and aides darted between offices. Every word Churchill spoke was met with a micro-shock. A pause here, a nod there, subtle shifts in posture revealing hidden tensions. Outside, Europe teetered on the brink. The Ardennes winter pressed against every window, snow falling like soft white warnings, blanketing the world in silence that made every heartbeat audible. Yet inside, the air crackled with adrenaline, every decision a step between unity and division, victory and political disaster. Churchill's presence was magnetic, a steady eye in the storm. He maneuvered through journalists and generals alike, weaving acknowledgement and praise into sentences that felt effortless but carried the weight of an army's morale. Behind the public words, Eisenhower, Patton, and Bradley exchanged glances relief, mixed with awe. One man had averted a fracture that could have slowed the Allied advance into Germany. The tension climaxed in fleeting micro-moments, a misread gesture, a scribbled note, the subtle tremor of a hand, and the near collision of history itself. Visualize it: the snow outside, the warmth of strategic brilliance inside, and a single man steering the course of a war with nothing but words, timing, and intuition. Pause. Reflect. Reflect. History isn't only shaped by battles, it's shaped by choices made in the shadows of power. Like, comment, and subscribe if you believe leadership extends beyond the battlefield. The press room emptied. The echoes of footsteps bounced off the cold stone walls. Outside, snow continued to fall, muffling the world, as if the winter itself wanted to absorb the tension. Inside, emotions ran deep: relief, pride, and the subtle hum of anxiety that hadn't fully released. American generals Eisenhower, Patton, Bradley exchanged quiet words. The danger of a fractured alliance had been real, and it had passed. Their authority remained intact, yet they carried the reminder of fragility. Every decision, every public misstep could ripple across continents and cost lives. Montgomery's influence persisted, but Churchill's intervention had shifted the narrative. The heroism of the troops, the Americans and their allies, would be preserved in reports, in whispered stories, in history books yet to be written. Newspapers would highlight courage, sacrifice, and strategic brilliance without inflaming egos. Imagine the faces of soldiers in the field receiving word that their efforts were recognized, that unity held, that their sacrifices mattered. Micro shocks of relief flickered in each mind as the chain of command held firm. History often reduces battles to numbers, maps, and dates, but here, survival was political, emotional, and moral. One man's skillful diplomacy had kept the momentum of victory alive. Take a moment, reflect. Leadership isn't only measured on the battlefield. Comment below. What do you think was Churchill's most critical move? The ripple of Churchill's quiet decisiveness extended far beyond that snowy press room. Historians would later mark this moment not for the words spoken, but for the balance restored. Allied unity, already tested by brutal battles, remained unbroken, and the push into Germany continued without hesitation. Montgomery's ambitions were tempered by circumstance. Eisenhower's command was reaffirmed. Bradley and Patton could breathe, knowing the chain of command was respected, the trust between nations preserved. The subtleties of diplomacy, timing, tact, restraint, had saved lives, battles, and ultimately, the war effort. The legacy of this moment lies in leadership that transcends rank. Courage is not only in the trenches, but in quiet intervention, in reading the room, in shaping morale without fanfare. Every decision, spoken word, private counsel, public acknowledgement mattered. Micro shocks of tension gave way to relief, shaping how historians and generals would remember January 1945. Reflect. Victory is fragile, and sometimes it is preserved not with a rifle, but with wisdom, foresight, and subtle authority. What would have happened if Churchill had hesitated? Comment below, share your thoughts on this pivotal leadership moment. History often glorifies the battlefield, guns, tanks, strategy, but true leadership sometimes unfolds in the quietest of rooms. In January 1945, Churchill's intervention reminded the world that war is not only fought with weapons, but with judgment, patience, and moral courage. Allied forces marched onward into Germany, yet the memory of that press room tension lingered. A single word, a careful nod, a restrained critique, these subtle actions preserved trust, upheld authority, and prevented a fracture that might have altered the course of history. The Battle of the Bulge had tested men in the snow, but the human mind and heart were tested in the corridors of command. Lessons endure. Diplomacy is a weapon. Wisdom, a shield, and courage, often unseen, can shape the fate of nations. Pause. Reflect. If leadership is measured by its impact on both people and history, this moment stands timeless. If you found this story compelling, like, comment leadership, and subscribe for more stories where courage meets strategy.